Lonwabo Maqubela from Perpetua joins us now for a full look into the day that was in markets. Lonwabo, thanks so much for your time today. I've been speaking about upbeat sentiment when looking at those boards. This, of course, comes as traders eye the end of that long U.S. government shutdown. This comes after the Senate passed a vote overnight as lawmakers move closer to clinching a funding deal. It's been interesting to see how markets have reacted to this. I mean, when looking at those everyday moves as the shutdown ran long and long, it seemed like markets were brushing things off. But now that we're, nearing an end to it, it seems like markets are taking that in and running with it. Just your analysis of that and how it's filtered through to markets action today.
Hi, Ndaulen. Yes, I think that's a very interesting observation that you've made. I think it's that complacency in the market that tends to ignore the risks when they arise, and then the asymmetry of celebrating the good news when they come, even though they were never priced in. And I think it probably reflects the mood of the market overall. That's been, having gone through the Trump tariffs and actually kind of got over that pretty quickly. The markets has been in a buoyant mood. I think that would be a fair observation to make. And particularly in the US, trading on multiples that have only been probably reached once or twice since or ever. And so really this positive sentiment in the market is exactly reflected in this kind of behavior. I do think that the market is ignoring some of the economic data that's come out, particularly showing on, slowing employment, and then increasingly we're finding more data that shows us that the consumer is under pressure. I think the US GDP has printed a positive number primarily because of AI capex. So it's quite significant numbers that are actually impacting GDP. But I think for a lot of companies, what really matters is consumption.
Yeah.
And we are increasingly seeing data that tells us that this consumption is slowing, and the consumer's under strain.
And talking about the consumer under strain, we can say the same about the consumer here at home. We're still seeing the likes of a Vodacom experiencing trouble when it comes to that prepaid market. Now, that aside, and looking at its overall earnings, earnings up over 30%. But the big question remains, right? How much did they pay Nkosana Makate? Have you crunched the numbers? What are your estimates on that front?
Yeah, so I've seen numbers that range from 500 to 700 million, which is a substantial amount of money. For the innovator. But I think to your point, the consumption in South Africa does look very competitive, and you saw in that prepaid market churn where yes, Vodacom did fix the base in terms of the numbers and clean up the numbers, but prepaid customers were down 7%. I think what was interesting is that data traffic was up 31%, but it doesn't show up in the revenue, which tells you that tariffs are still falling in South Africa.
And it was interesting to
okay.
You can continue.
Oh, okay. No, I just only wanted to mention that the rest of the business, however, showed some really strong growth. Particularly, I think, across the board, but Egypt plus 40% in local currency, as well as the international division, showing 12% growth. Safaricom, 35% EBITDA growth, 10% revenue. I think there are a couple of trends that are still going positively for Vodacom in Africa. I'd probably say the first one is M-Pesa continues to grow.
Yeah.
It accounts for nearly 30% of the business, and it was actually up 20% in this last result. And they're adding more financial products onto that platform. And so the profitability and volumes are improving. I'd say the second one is data. Data actually still continues to grow in Africa, in most of their markets, and penetration is still low. Smartphone penetration is low. So it does paint a picture of, potential growth in the years to come.
Yeah. Quickly before we get into your stock pick, talk me through what you made of the gains we're seeing in Sibanye-Stillwater. The last time I checked, that share price up 7% following the end of the legal battle with Appian Capital. Things seem to be looking out for the counter as a whole. Gold prices up. We're also seeing a turnaround with those PGM prices.
Yeah, no, I think they've done outside of the commodity prices, I do think they've done a good job in terms of stabilizing the business, the operations, the mining operations. I did note that the sector actually as a whole was quite strong today.
Yeah.
So I think the market probably did breathe a sigh of relief that the cost wasn't any more than what it needed to be. But certainly what really tends to what matters for Sibanye, and I think it's true for all of them, is ultimately the level of the precious metals prices, which continue to be strong.
All right, let's get into your stock pick. Where are you seeing opportunity today? You have 30 seconds, that is, to state your case.
Okay, one of the most underperforming sectors year to date is actually in the beverages sector globally. So I've gone with one of the global counters, being Diageo. Obviously would have had the news of the announce of the new CEO, which I think will have some opportunity to improve the profitability of the business. But the underlying problem that Diageo has had, and actually the whole sector, is that of falling consumption. We think there is an economic reason for this, in that consumers are actually drinking less just because of the consumer wallet. But we think that element of it is cyclical. There's also a bit of a structural one in that consumers are drinking less. We think this plays into Diageo's hands, in that, from a pricing perspective, and premiumization will likely continue to be a driver of revenue, and they have all the major brands and are well positioned. And lastly, the valuation has been pushed quite significantly down over the last couple of years, nearly halving from the peak. And so, we think this is a good opportunity to add to it.
All right, Diageo, one to look out for. Lonwabo, thanks so much for your time and sharing your insights with us this evening. That was Lonwabo Maqubela from Perpetua.